Hi, this is the summary of the lecture 4 for the Economics for Business B. In this lecture we've looked at why the governments intervene in markets. We have started looking at the debate and basically the historical debate on how economies should be structured, rather in free market, or we should have some intervention from the government, and why. So which are the problems of capitalism somehow. Then we've moved more specifically to list the market failures, and then we've been going one by one. In particular, in this summary, I'm going to focus a little bit on public goods, natural monopoly, and negative externalities. So, moving into free market versus intervention, we can make a summary of the economic thinking history. We have some top authors looking for or advocating for free markets. That would be obviously Adam Smith as a father of the neoclassical economics in the 18th century. So he argues, as we said in previous lectures, that there is an invisible hand that might determine prices, and then this gives correct incentives to suppliers and consumers. More recently, by the start of the 20th century, Friedrich Hayek basically considers that markets are complex. It's true that they might have some limitations, but still any distortion from governments will worsen any possible market problem. So at the end, governments only make problems worse rather than solve, as long as it's practically impossible to understand all the complexities. Obviously, we have other economies that have some arguments in favor of government intervention. The famous ones are Karl Marx, who wrote the book The Capital in 1867, and he argues that there is a dispute between capital and labor that will cause profit rate to decrease. And this ultimately will be the end of capitalism. So government needs to play a role in order to avoid this sort of disputes. Another author that considers the government should intervene is John Maynard Keynes. Actually, John Maynard Keynes observed himself the Great Depression, and he realized that counter-cyclical policies could correct some of the issues of depressions or recessions. And this actually is opposite at what we've been witnessing with the EU and UK with austerity measures. Another author that argues that capitalism has problems is Joseph Schumpeter. He sees economic cycles as something different. He sees economic cycles as a reason to generate some tensions in the economy and actually the stagnation of innovation. At some point, basically through creative destruction, through entrepreneurs that destroy incumbent firms, it ends up that there is very difficult to get new products and services, to incorporate new innovation into the industry, and then this will bring capitalism into trouble again. So obviously the government needs to play a role here on controlling this capitalist mentality. So we have some authors which they find some problems with capitalism, some others which advocate for free market, but anyway, the literature, especially the literature after 1930s, have developed a lot, and this literature has been looking at some relevant market failures. So we will go to some of them in this summary. Obviously in the lecture I've been explaining all of them in detail. Some of them are public goods. I'm going to explain that in a bit. Then we have information failures like moral hazard and adverse selection. Something related to that are the incomplete markets. Then we have the government that needs to correct all these macroeconomic disequilibriums that we can call structural failures. So obviously unemployment is one objective for the government, or inflation. Inequality and exploitation are other elements that are important. So one reason for taxation or one reason to implement minimum wages is basically to assure some equality into the society. And then the point 6 and 7 are going to be commented as well, so I'm going to explain a bit, especially monopoly regulation or the existence of natural monopolies, and as well I'm going to discuss on externalities. So let's move into public goods. Public goods are characterized by being non-rival and non-excludable. As we can see in the table, examples of public good might be street lighting or basic health system, in which we or consumers or individuals cannot be actually excluded from consumption, and obviously the fact that someone is consuming does not impede that someone else is consuming at the same time. So this might be the case of street lighting. The solution in this case is that the government should be supplying these goods. The only problem is that there is the possibility of having a free rider issue. So obviously individuals don't want to pay. So that's why the only way of having a good provision of these goods is having the government in place. We've also discussed natural monopoly. Technically, a natural monopoly, it's something we have seen in the table before as something non-rival but excludable, but we can also go into the implications of the long-run average cost. Actually, a monopoly or natural monopoly occurs where production at the minimum long-run average cost can only take place if one firm produces the industry's total output. So there is no space in the market for two firms or more. So there is the need of having only one. Obviously, this is difficult to deal with because the economy, the society needs this product. However, having only one company might be bad for consumers or might be bad overall for the economy, as the production is not the optimal and the price might be quite high. So which are the solutions? There are two basic solutions. One is nationalization. So it means that the government has the ownership of these natural monopolies, and the other one is privatization, which means there is a private ownership of these monopolies. Obviously, privatization requires some regulation, which is costly in terms of supervision, monitoring, and enforcement, and at the same time does not necessarily incentivize efficiency and cost cutting. So this is an existing debate, and what we are seeing in the UK is an increase now of privatization, but it might be more for political reasons than for economic ones. And to conclude this summary, let's talk a bit on externalities. So negative externalities occur when firm has paid for inputs such as land, labor, and capital, and this is reflected on the price of the good. However, there are a third party which is receiving a cost from this production. This happens, or the typical case is pollution. So it has a social cost. We don't want pollution. Pollution is bad for all individuals, but this pollution does not need to be internalized in the firm. So obviously the firm could be paying for that, but it's difficult, or one of the difficulties is to give monetary value, so attach a monetary value to this pollution. The other things is how this can be solved through a private agreement or through the government intervention. So there are some theories finding possibilities of solving these issues through private agreements, which might be the internalization of the externality if the value of this pollution can be estimated. The other one is assigning property rights. So who is the property rights of generating this this pollution? Obviously, then it gives the possibility of purchasing property rights for creating more pollution, and this might be a solution that is associated to the cost theorem. Using the legal system to enforce more or less pollution, and obviously there are others which are related to this third, which is the government intervention in terms of regulation, legislation, and obviously adding some taxes or subsidies in terms of positive or negative externalities. Obviously taxes are associated to negative externalities and subsidies to positive ones, like for example education. So this is the summary of the lecture 4, and I will prepare another summary for the last lecture next week, lecture 5. So thank you for your attention.